Hey everybody, this is Brian McQuaig. It is July 14th, 2013, and this is episode 6 of Pushing Back. This essay started out as being a description of what the standard United States citizen has become in terms of being a lazy coward. And the reason I can say this is because that has been my mode for the last 20 or 30 years. So I was watching this video of Andrew Napolitano this morning, and it inspired me to take clips of it and outline for you just exactly how lazy and how cowardly we become. The cool thing about Judge Knapp is he's very articulate and he's very passionate when talking about personal liberty, especially about the Bill of Rights and the Constitution. Okay, so what is it you think when you think of yourself as a citizen of the United States and you turn that mirror on yourself? Do you say, well, I'm going to trust the government to be benevolent and you're going to just put it on autopilot for the rest of your life? Or do you try to find out first of all, what your liberties are, and secondly, what your role and the role of the government is in this supposed free society? So if you just want to put the government on autopilot, you might as well just turn off the video now because I'm wasting your time. However, if you really want to know what your liberties are as a tangible thing, and you want to know what your role is in keeping your society free, then the first thing you need to know is that your liberty is based on natural law.
All right, from ridiculous trials to serious trials. Some men say the earth is round and some men say it is flat. But if it is round, could the king's command flatten it? And if it is flat, could an act of parliament make it round? Well, those words were articulated by St. Thomas More in defense of himself in his own trial before a jury in which he was charged with treason. The alleged act of treason and the proven act of treason under the law at the time was the refusal to acknowledge that the king was the head of the church on earth. But when he was arguing to his jurors that the king can't make a flat earth round and the parliament can't make a round earth flat, he was not only appealing to their common sense, of course that can't happen, he was appealing to their understanding of the natural law, to the way the earth and the humans who inhabit it are created. And in appealing to the natural law, he was arguing something that we need to understand today, that even the King of England has natural limitations on his power. And even the Parliament has natural limitations on its power. And those limitations were ordained by the creator of the earth and the king and everybody on it. And that creator is the Almighty, whatever terminology you choose to apply to him. Thomas More was picking up an argument that had been made by Aristotle and Augustine and Aquinas before him and would eventually be made by John Locke and Thomas Jefferson after him. And the essence of it is what Tony articulated just a few minutes ago. Our rights come from our humanity and not from the government.
So in that clip, what the judge is illustrating for us is what natural law is, and he clearly demonstrates the relationship between the ordinary citizen and the government in the natural law. But the most important thing we need to remember is that natural law existed before any government did. And that's what the story of the Bill of Rights actually is, as enshrined as the first 10 amendments of the Constitution of the United States. Again, Judge Knapp.
Following 4 years. And we all know what those amendments are. Congress shall make no law abridging the freedom of speech. I've often argued that the most important word in there is the. I'll repeat it for you. Congress shall make no law abridging the freedom of speech. By calling it the freedom of speech, the authors, the founders, recognized that it pre-existed the government. It pre-existed the king. It pre-existed the government that they were creating here. It was a part of our humanity. So all of these amendments, your right to think as you please, your right to develop your own personality. I've also often told O'Reilly he should be grateful that that's a guaranteed right. Your right to worship or not to worship, your right to say what you think, to publish what you say, your right to travel, your right to keep and bear arms, which, my friends, is not the right to shoot at a deer. It's the right to shoot at a tyrant if it takes over the government.
You gotta love that judge. Anyway, I cannot stress to you how important each and every single one of those amendments are to our freedoms. However, one of the most important ones, the Fourth Amendment, is completely gone. And it's gone because of the likes of George W. Bush, Barack Hussein Obama, Harry Reid, Nancy Pelosi, Janet Napolitano. Don't get me started with her. Anyway, Eric Holder, and a growing list of Republicans who are nothing but Democrat light, and they're just progressives in conservative clothing. Of course, all of who should be impeached. Anyway, the Fourth Amendment is one I hold very dear to me. In fact, if the government just left the Fourth Amendment alone, I probably wouldn't even be on YouTube talking to you this way. I would be off doing whatever I like to do. I'd probably be building another computer. But because it's all but gone, I have no choice but to sit here and try to talk some sense into you guys.
And that quintessentially American right in the Fourth Amendment, the right to be left alone, today called the right to privacy. Because the Fourth Amendment says before the government can cross that threshold, which the king let the soldiers cross on their own say-so, the government has to go to a neutral judge and prove under oath something called probable cause, a phrase meaning it is more likely than not that on the other side of that threshold where the government wants to go, there is evidence of crime, and there's no other way for the government to get it. That was the law, that was the culture, that was the value, that was what was accepted by Americans. Washington is elected.
And the judge uses this to illustrate violation of the First Amendment.
But in public, in front of the press, such as it was at the time, he refers to President Adams as his rotundity. And President Adams indicts Congressman Lyons under the Alien and Sedition Act, and he's prosecuted in Boston, and he's convicted. And Congressman Matthew Lyons serves 2 years in a federal prison in western Massachusetts for making fun of the president's waistline. All right, now, if you're from Hudson County, New Jersey, or Chicago, or New Orleans, or Boston, you'll understand the second half of this picture. Congressman Lyons ran for re-election from his jail cell. And he won. Of course, by the time he was re-elected, Jefferson was in the White House. The Alien and Sedition Acts had expired. Jefferson said, even if they didn't expire, I'm not going to enforce them anyway. You can say anything you want about me. That's why we fought the Revolution, so that people would have these freedoms. And the government, instead of interfering with them, will protect them.
And to explain why those we elect choose to ignore the oath that gave them the power to represent us in government, Judge Napolitano explains.
St. Augustine used to call this libido dominandi. No, not that kind of libido. This kind of libido is the lust to dominate, the desire to tell other people how to live their lives. And my friends, the great problem we have today is that this is the kind of person we have put into office. We should put into office people who will leave us the hell alone.
And the fruits of our laziness and cowardice have come to this.
And the Patriot Act permits federal agents to write their own search warrants. And we have gone a full 360 degrees from the very reason for which we seceded from Great Britain in order to become a very special place on earth where liberty and not government would reign.
So I hope you take the time to learn the Constitution, especially the first 10 amendments. And there's a link in my blog on a good place to start. I'd like to publicly thank Judge Napolitano and Americans for Prosperity for allowing me to use the clips from his speech in 2012. And I'd like to thank you for taking the time to listen to this video. And so I'll see you next time.